Running a business comes with a lot of what-ifs. But luckily, there's a simple answer to them. Shopify. It's the commerce platform behind millions of businesses, including Thrive Cosmetics and Momofuku, and it'll help you with everything you need. From website design and marketing to boosting sales and expanding operations, Shopify can get the job done and make your dream a reality. Turn those what-ifs into... Sign up for your $1 per month trial at shopify.com/special offer.
Home means something different to everyone. But with Rocket Mortgage, home can mean even more. It can mean a college education, taming your high-interest debt, even a renovation. We've made it easier than ever to use your home equity. That home you worked so hard for, now it can work hard for you. Call 800-4ROCKET or visit rocket.com to find out more.
Rocket Mortgage, LLC. Licensed in all 50 states. NMLSConsumerAccess.org. Number 3030.
Welcome to 4.0 to Pro, the pickleball podcast that focuses on a single shot, tip, or strategy to improve your pickleball game with every single pocket-sized episode. Our goal is to make you better on the court every time you hear our voices.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of 4.0 to Pro, your pocket-sized pickleball podcast, where we teach you a single shot or strategy every single episode. I'm Michael O'Neill here in Long Beach, California, joined by one Mircea Murariu, probably quite exhausted from a full week in Naples, Florida at the U.S. Open, but there he is in his lovely lair in Boca Raton. What's up, man? How are you?
I'm good. It's good to be back, but definitely enjoyed my trip to Naples. If you haven't been there, I would definitely check it out. They call it the biggest pickleball party in the world. And for those of you that haven't been there that wonder why it's called that, after you go, you know exactly why it is. They do a great job with the center court. It's a really amazing environment, really fun. They really try their best to do a great job, and it's quite an experience. Definitely worth doing at least once.
It looks like a long week of pickleball as well. Like, you are on court a lot and you're playing a bunch. I got a chance to see you on CBS, which was super cool. I'm not sure if you've ever been
awesome.
on CBS before, but you were playing with Shelby Bates in split age mixed. And
Yep.
it was really cool to see you like right there with Chevy commercials happening and stuff.
Yeah, it's fun. And that's one of the cool things about it is they broadcast a ton of the matches, including the senior pro, the split age, and they're often just amazing matches. There's one year where I played with Georgia Johnson against Dane Gingrich and Callie Jo Smith. And so many people said that our match was one of the best matches of the tournament.
It is a shame, too, because if anybody watches a senior pro match, the play level is incredible. There's a reason why there's the word pro after the senior part. And I only wish that some of the other big sanctioning bodies had a happier place for the senior pros to play, because it would be cool to get a little more national exposure for this particular age bracket that is a huge age bracket in pickleball. So it's a little bit of a bummer that it's underserved, I think, in the global dynamic of pickleball.
Yeah, obviously I'm a little bit biased because that's my demographic, but I feel that there's so many people that are our age that are playing, which is one of the great things about the sport. And I've often been told that we're more relatable. We're not 20 years old. Their athletic skills are off the charts. It's amazing to see the skill level in person of the open pros. But at the same time, I think that we do offer an alternative. And at times we have incredible points and incredible matches. And it's very humbling that they showcase that at time at the U.S. Open.
Yeah, sometimes I'll see a group of like 19 plus 5-0s play at Los Cab, and it almost doesn't resemble the game that everything's an Ernie, an ATP, it's some crazy hands battle that it's just, wow, it's incredible, the speed and the athleticism. But there's something to be said. We used to say in racquetball, old guy game is very difficult to play against. There's some angles you don't expect, and there's a lot of wisdom behind those shots. And I feel the same way about senior pro pickleball. Guys, one of the most requested shows is what if I'm coming over from tennis? We all have a relative or a friend who's coming over to pickleball from tennis, and they bring typically amazing footwork, and they have a lot of repertoire of shots. I remember Rob Nunnery said they call some of the higher level players, the people that played like D1 tennis, he just calls them just add water. You just add a little bit of water, and they're all of a sudden a 5-0 pickleball player. But there's that thing that happens, Mircea, where somebody comes out of the gates and they have all these these tools ready. And they go, wow, these guys are pretty good. And they do pretty well initially. And then they realize pickleball is a different sport. And there's a bunch of shots that they do not have in their arsenal. And they got to learn those if they really want to compete in doubles pickleball. Singles is a different story, of course.
Exactly. And I was going to bring that up. There is an element of singles that translates immediately. It is like mini tennis, especially at the beginning. When you first start playing, other than the overhand serve, you got to get used to the underhand serve. But in terms of the returns, getting up to the net, hitting volleys, passing shots, that definitely translates very well. So tennis translates to pickleball singles very well. And obviously the backbone of tennis is singles. And it's interesting that in pickleball, it's the opposite. Yet there are a ton of pickleball tournaments that include singles, that you have the highest level pro players playing singles as part of the PPA and APP. So singles is an important part of the game.
It really is. It's much smaller in pickleball, but it is nice to see when somebody comes from this tennis background and all of a sudden is hitting these buttery two-ees from the back and just lacing them down the line. All right. One of those things that we've all seen the posts. They posted on the tennis channel or on one of these Instagram accounts of some really great pickleball point. And then inevitably some tennis player was like, oh, whatever. It's a dumb ping pong game. It's a huge disparaging remark about pickleball usually. And those are only made from the people that play tennis that have never really tried to play pickleball at a higher level. Because if they did, they'd realize that it is 40% different than tennis. Maybe more in terms of the shots you have to learn going from a tennis player to play pickleball.
It's not just different, it's more complicated, and it requires additional skills. So let's talk about the things that translate well. So you have the footwork, you have the ground strokes, and you have the volleys that generally translate really well. Obviously, the serve does not. The pickleball serve translates somewhat to a ground stroke in tennis, so that's fairly equivalent, but you don't have the overhead serve. But not only do you have the serve, the return, the volley, the passing shots, maybe a drop shot or a lob or an overhead. So you could also include those. But then you also have the dinking. You have the drops. You have the left side, right side. What do you try to focus on when you're on the right side? What do you try to focus on when you're left side? All those things add up to a more complicated game that people just don't realize when they haven't played it very much.
Let's talk about some of the overall things, like very first steps as a tennis player to think about as you're stepping on the court. To me, the first thing for somebody to think of is all the swings need to be way shorter and more compact than you would typically do in tennis. The backswing is almost not a thing, although I'd love for you to address something. We're going to get into a little more depth on that. But when you see someone like Anna Bright or even Annalie Waters or whatever, and they're doing these full roundhouse swings to actually hit their forehand. My argument is they don't have to do that. There's something about that swing that helps them hit the ball maybe with the right swing path, or how do you justify this sort of roundhouse swing that they're doing? Do you know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, absolutely. They do it on certain shots when they have full control of the ball, when they have a dead dink, for example. And one of the ways that they adjust and allow themselves to have that swing is, if you notice, quite frequently they step back a little bit from the kitchen and are not right on the line as they're dinking with those types of shots. They've adjusted the shots where it allows them to both speed up and to dink and hit heavy rolls. By stepping back, it allows them to hit that variety. They've adjusted their games somewhat from the tennis type swings. Anna Bright more so than Annalie, because Annalie obviously grew up playing pickleball, but she does have tennis style swings that partially came from her mom, who was a high level tennis player. And obviously Annalie's gotten some coaching from Lee over the years, but that's where those swings come from.
Is there an element of deception in there that you're trying to make the swing look bigger than it is a little bit?
Oh, for sure. And I do that as well at times. And you will see an example is like Ben John. Sometimes he'll have a dead dink in the middle and he'll take a little bit of a bigger swing to look as if he's going to speed up the ball. And then he'll hit an inside out roll dink at someone's feet. That's one good way that you can deceive your opponent.
In general, though, I think of James Ignatowicz. He always seems to be my reference on this, is that when I first started playing pickleball in like 2020, he still had a pretty large swing. And then maybe in 2022 or so, maybe 2023, he compacted his swing so much that it's almost like it never gets out of his peripheral vision. It starts like at his waist and his hip, right next to his leg, and it just follows through to his shoulder and that's it. It's like a 90-degree from start to finish kind of swing. And I think it's a really good way to visualize as a tennis player how compact a pickleball swing should be.
James and Anna are perfect examples. They started playing in South Florida with us, with myself and the Johnsons and Millie Rain and Gabe Tardio. We played so many rec games together. And when they first came in and started playing, James was taking huge swings, and he actually quickly became obsessed with pickleball, where he was playing, I think he was playing like 8 to 10 hours a day. It was insane. And he was drilling with Anna quite a bit, but he would drill with anyone that would drill with him. I drilled with him a bunch. It was really amazing how hard he worked on his game, and he did realize that it was a different sport. And very quickly, he still is able to accelerate through the ball so much and generate so much pace. I actually played split age with him, and I recall that I was just so impressed at how much pace he could generate with such a relatively compact backswing.
Yeah, and I think another thing when you're coming from tennis is that you're used to a mechanical grip from the ball to the interface of the tennis racket. With the strings and then the felt of the ball and then the compression of the ball, you can get a ton of spin and really direct the ball in very specific ways in tennis that literally just don't exist in pickleball, or exist in such a small form that you have to start learning how to topspin a pickleball. It's very different relying on that much spin when you don't have it in pickleball.
When you're playing singles, you need to take somewhat more of a swing because you want to generate some pace with your returns. It's really important that you get your serve a little bit harder, a little bit deeper, and then same thing with your returns. You need to get your returns a little bit deeper, have a little bit more pace in order to be able to get up to the kitchen and control the net. Those things are something you have to really adjust tremendously in doubles, especially at higher level doubles. You can get pretty decent 4-5-5-0 in doubles when you're, like we talked about our last show, the banger show. You can really whack the ball pretty good in pickleball. The problem is that the court is short, and the closer you get to the kitchen, the more margin for error you're going to have, and the bigger the swing, the more you're going to be hitting the ball out.
And I think that maybe one of the other things that we bring, considering we don't have strings, is a lot of times tennis players bring a really wristy shot to pickleball. They're expecting the brush on the ball to maybe do different things than it will do. And paddle technology has definitely come a huge way in the last few years. We can definitely get more spin on the ball than we could a couple of years ago, but it's nowhere near what you can get from a tennis racket to a tennis ball. So it's just not going to perform the same way, much less the fact that we're hitting a wiffle ball versus a much heavier rubber ball in tennis.
Yeah, when I was playing tennis, and even at my level, I did play college tennis Brown, and I played some satellites afterward. I reached a pretty high level, but not nearly what the ATP players and the WTA players are out there doing right now. But when you're playing tennis, you drill so much, and with the strings and the rackets and the ball, you feel like you can hit the ball on a dime, even as big as the court is. That's one of the things you have to change in terms of your mindset. In pickleball, the ball is hard, the court is smaller, the paddles are harder, there is more dwell time and the ability to generate more spin on the current paddles. That being said, you can't be perfect. And I'm a perfectionist to begin with. One of the biggest things that I had to get out of my head is just the element of perfection that you're trying to achieve, or you think you can achieve, is really not quite there. So you have to take out that mindset or change the mindset to improve your margins. And we've talked about this a bunch on the pod, but a perfect example is when you hit a put-away volley, which seems like, as a tennis player, yeah, I can hit a put-away volley. But you'll be surprised how many people miss because they're going for the sidelines because they think, okay, I can hit the ball on a dime, and you just can't. So if you take one thing away from this one podcast, when you're hitting a relatively easy volley that you feel you can put away, take 10% of the court out of your repertoire on each sideline. Focus on that middle 80% of the court, and it will also actually improve your game if you do that for all of your shots, even like passing shots, when you're playing singles, when you're dinking, when you're trying to hit resets. It's really important, and it comes up in matches over and over and over again.
Yeah, 100%. And it's something I incorporate now. You're always in my head, dude. And I get on the court and I go, okay, we're knocking at least a foot off of each sideline right when I get in there. Clearly, it works for you. You end up on CBS, for crying out loud. One of the things that I feel like is probably the most difficult transition from tennis is the slice. The slice in general, but certainly slice volleys. And you agree or disagree with this, but I almost think that from the baseline to the kitchen, I can completely see slicing on the baseline. Sometimes you do it on a return, even though it seems like right now that's evolving out of the game. They don't want to give people topspin on the other side, but that's maybe a little more advanced than we need to get today. But let's say a slice return of serve, and certainly a slice dink is a thing. But between those two, in that transition zone, it's almost as if a tennis player could just think, I shouldn't slice in this area. I can backspin, which isn't quite the same. You can put a little soft backspin on the ball with a little bit of paddle angle, like a reset. But to do the slice motion where you're pushing your tennis racket away from your body, or in this case, a paddle, in order to impart a fair amount of backspin, more than just would happen from the paddle angle by itself, should effectively be eliminated from pickleball because it's not really a thing.
In the transition zone, I would definitely evolve into exactly what you're saying, is that backspin. And I feel that's actually one of my best shots, is my backhand when people attack me, to be able to try to reset that. And I'm definitely opening up the face of the paddle. So it's facing more upwards, if you will, the face of the paddle, rather than hitting through it. Because if you hit it through it, you're going to pop it up.
Right.
You're definitely going to pop it up. And you do want to give it that soft arc where it lands in the kitchen. Maybe it's a little bit penetrating where it'll skid a little bit. So you don't want to completely eliminate having some follow through there, a little bit of follow through, not all the way to the other side of your body like tennis, obviously, but you do want to cut it a little bit and get that ball to control and drop in the kitchen. Absolutely. I do agree with you in the transition zone. And that's really the biggest adjustments that tennis players have to make. And if I was coming from tennis, I was telling someone, hey, this is the number 1 and 2 things you really need to drill. It's really dinking and transition zone. You call it no man's land in tennis for a reason, because you don't want people to be in the middle of the court. You want them either to be at the net or in the backcourt. And in pickleball, you don't want to set up camp there and hang out there for 5, 6, 12 shots. But at the same time, you should feel comfortable in the transition zone hitting 2 or 3 shots to get up to the kitchen. And obviously in the kitchen, once you get closer to the net, you do not want to have that backswing, and you don't want to have that giant follow through on the vast majority of your shots.
Here's a real world example of a tennis slice volley. We had a newish person on the other side of the net that came from tennis, and that was his volley. He was doing the tennis slice volley that we all learned, that we've done a billion times in tennis. He was playing left side. And we knew that when we drove a ball to him, this is right up your language, Mircea, he would not hurt us with the volley. There was no way, because what he would do is he would just slice that volley back, and he would drop a relatively low ball in the middle of the transition zone, which means that we just got to run right up and get right to the kitchen every single time. And we could hit it as hard as we wanted. All he did is just cut it a little more and went a little wider with it, but he never kept us back. We knew that if we just drove the ball to that one guy, we were getting to the non-volley zone every single time. Now, he wouldn't know that because he doesn't know that yet. He doesn't know that he should have been trying to keep us back. But we identified a spot where they couldn't hurt us. We knew that there was going to be no offensive shot because it was only going to be this sort of soft, slowish slice coming back at us. So we just hit it there every single time and got up to the kitchen every single time.
Michael, I got to tell you, that's music to my ears, because you said that you figured out a spot where your opponents can't hurt you and you just hit it there every single time.
Yeah.
That is next level. And it sounds so simple, yet I can't tell you how often I see teams playing out there where they just don't recognize that, or vice versa. They don't recognize that there's something hurting them on the other side, and they keep hitting it to that spot, and it just keeps hurting them. So I love that strategic analysis that you're describing there, Michael. Well done.
I'm heading off to play a little pickle right after this show, Mircea, and in my car, as I drive down to Los Cab there in Fountain Valley, California, I'm going to be doing 2 things. Number 1, I'm going to break out the old Yobow percussion massager on my legs and get them warmed up. And I'm going to grab my Yobow activation ball, which sits in my console of my car. These things have been around forever. In fact, my girlfriend's dad had the drawstring version. Like you start it like you're starting a chainsaw or a lawnmower, and you just zing it, and then you start getting it moving with your wrist. It totally warms up your forearms and your wrists. If you guys ever struggle with tennis elbow or something like that, do yourself a favor and warm up your forearms a little bit before you get to the courts. And that's what these activation balls do. They're so great. They get your grip, your wrist, your forearm. Anybody that needs to swing a bat or a racket, it's almost like swinging 2 or 3 bats before you get up and swing at the plate.
Yep.
It just gets your whole body going. I'm a little bit lucky, Mircea, because I'm a drummer and I have some particularly strong forearms and wrists, but that just means I got more muscle to warm up. And it's more muscle to be sore when and if I get any sort of soreness there. But I'm much more limited having the activation ball in my Yobow Bak Pak Plus.
My favorite thing is obviously the percussion therapeutic massage pistol. It's just amazing. But don't forget about the bands. The bands are really helpful to help warm up the quads and the adductors and the abductors. Tennis players need to adjust to having your knees bent relatively constantly at the kitchen and going back and forth in a not crouch where you're bending over at the waist, but you have your knees bent and you're using your adductors and abductors going back and forth. And that's one of the skills that you really need to work on. And one of the things that helps you warm up and prevent your injuries is the Bak Pak Plus.
I sat next to a doctor a couple nights ago at this event, and they're all sports medicine doctors. And when I found that out, in fact, my sports medicine doctor was there, which is very funny to see him out in the real world. But I said, what's it been like for you guys with pickleball injuries? And he said, it's crazy how many people come in and they get injured. So guys, do yourself a favor. Pick up the Yobow Bak Pak Plus. It's really easy. All you got to do is go to 402p.com/warmup, 402p.com/warmup. You get 10% off. It's a net bag that you put inside your pickleball bag, and it's got all the stuff. It's got the bands. It's got the activation ball. It's got the percussion therapeutic gun. It's got all the stuff. Yobow, thank you as always. 402p.com/warmup. If we keep this theme of just the 2 or 3 things, if somebody really wanted to come from tennis into pickleball, I think modifying that swing from a slice type volley to what would be a punch volley, which would be straight ahead, and then even the next version, which would be more of a roll volley, where you're actually swinging low to high. And you guys can think about it almost like a ping pong shot, if you've seen like a higher level ping pong player play and how they have their swing path for those volleys. I think that's arguably the biggest, certainly in the volley space of pickleball, the biggest thing they need to learn is a more straightforward shot and a more topspin shot, especially when they're going from the transition zone into the kitchen.
Yes, Michael, definitely agree. They need to flatten out those volleys, for example, in hands battles. So when things start going fast, which is one of the most fun things of pickleball, are those hands battles. You can't take big swings, and you're not going to want to be slicing or hitting topspin volleys in that scenario, other than if you have a higher, fluffier ball that is like a pop-up, then you can obviously generate some topspin with that, or some slice/backspin on those types of shots. But generally speaking, in the hands battles that are going directly back and forth, those are the ones where you want to flatten the ball out. And when you're hitting fourths, or when someone has a dink that they float up a little bit to an attackable zone, like your waist or your thighs or your knees, one of the things that you can change ideally from tennis, the paddle is generally at the same plane of the net. So it's parallel, if you will, at times to the net when you're hitting the ball. I'm talking about the way your paddle is relative to your hand. So it's right there, right beside your hand. And what you want to do with some roll or flick volleys is really tip the paddle downward, so you have the head of the paddle down, and at times it can be almost perpendicular, like relative to the net, and then you use your shoulder to lift up the ball rather than just using your wrist.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up, because that's something you'd literally never do in tennis. That would be a shot you would never Can I even think of a circumstance in which you'd happen to have your tennis racket like that and certainly be swinging from the shoulder versus from the wrist? But I'm glad you brought up hands battles, because I think when someone first gets into pickleball from tennis, very often you're changing your grip in tennis. You're changing from the forehand to the backhand. You certainly do it in racquetball. We didn't mention this earlier, but like one of the main differences, the processing speed required in pickleball. When you're playing singles, I looked this up. You hit the ball, see where the other person's going to go, and then you get to where you need to go, is something like 2.8 or whatever it is. In pickleball, it's less than a second. It's like 0.7 to be able to process between your hit and the other person's hit if you're in a hands battle.
Yep.
To think that you have time to change the grip on the paddle, let's say from forehand to backhand, is very optimistic.
Yes, Michael. It is definitely suboptimal. You do not want to be changing your grip in hands battles. And the vast majority of players, at least quality high-level players, don't do that. And if you are still doing it, I highly encourage you to try to find some sort of happy medium between the forehand and the backhand where you don't have to change grips, because that is going to improve your hand speed, the quality of your ability to participate in hands battles for sure. Obviously, in tennis, you have a whole host of grips, and you can still do the same in pickleball. You can still use an extreme Western grip. It's just much more difficult the closer you get to the kitchen that you can have extreme grips. So you do have to consider continental or Eastern much more commonly in pickleball, and sometimes in between. You have a slightly in between an Eastern and a continental.
Easternental. That's kind of what I do.
Easternental. There you go.
Yeah, I'm right in that. I'm right in that Easternental area.
And I do that times. And I change my grips in pickleball as well, but not in the hands battles.
Yeah.
Absolutely not. One thing that I really want to emphasize is in terms of mindset, when you are playing tennis, you have much more of a being able to hit a winner mindset. And if you can really change that, even in singles, so even in singles passing shots, particularly on big shots, you want to hit a ball that is not a clean winner. Look, ideally, your perfect shot is a clean winner that you pass your opponent and you win the point. But your mindset should be, I'm going to hit a passing shot, ideally to have them stretch or hit the ball up, and then I set up the next one. So it's a combo shot. So everything should be a combination, even passing shots, but especially speed ups or attacks or instigate type balls, whatever you want to call them, from the kitchen, off the bounce, in the air. Those should be combos, because at the higher levels, those balls are going to come back, and people are getting better and better. So even like the 4.0, 5.0, the quality of play is getting better. Obviously, the paddles have changed. So you should really change your mindset to hit a combination with every ball, and sometimes it should be a 2 to 3 ball combination.
One thing that's such a staple of tennis is topspin. And you mentioned something earlier on the show, which was dwell time. And that's basically the amount of time, the fraction of a second that the ball is on the carbon fiber paddle face, which, by the way, if you haven't gotten a new paddle, you can go to carbonpickleball.com. Get 10% off your order by using the promo code 402P at checkout. It's a good time for a little carbon promo. Thanks, guys. The dwell time is a little different in pickleball because we don't have strings. And so your tendency may be to pronate or drop your wrist in tennis to get that lovely 6 to 12 brush on the back of the ball. But it's different in pickleball. In fact, we want to keep our wrist a little stiffer, and we're going 5 to 11 as your swing path, or 7 to 1 as your swing path, where you're coming around not only the backside, but through the side of the ball, is going to give you the dip on the ball that you envision as a tennis player, but maybe weren't getting when you tried to do 6 to 12 in pickleball.
If you can visualize like hitting the side of the ball, like slightly off center in terms of basically brushing up on the side of the ball, that's a good way to visualize it. And one additional thing on a two-handed backhand, you have to remember that the primary way that you're hitting a two-handed backhand in tennis is that, for example, if you're right-handed, your right hand is dominant and the left hand is just like a guide. When you're hitting a two-handed backhand, especially like dinking, for example, your left hand is much more dominant in pickleball with a two-handed backhand. So that's why often teach or have people practice by hitting left-handed dinks when they have a two-handed backhand, when we're trying to focus on that dominance of the left hand to be able to generate spin. This kind of dovetails into this discussion that we're coming around the side of the ball rather than if you're using your right hand as being dominant, you're going more from 6 to 12. So you're going on kind of the back of the ball where you're just coming on around the slightly to the side of the ball when you're playing pickleball.
I was just teaching my girlfriend the Tui dink the other day, and we just sat there and dinked left-handed for a while. I go, trust me, it's gonna feel terrible and weird. You're not gonna know why you did it. And we did it for 10 minutes. We got 20 back and forth. I said, now put your other hand on the paddle. And then she did, and all of a sudden she's got this Tui dink roll, and she didn't even have anything near there 15 minutes prior. It's a magic little thing you can do to train.
It really is. It's really a cool training method.
So if you're a tennis player transitioning to pickleball, other than shortening the backswing, really maybe stiffening your wrist, thinking about more topspin versus slice, man, I don't know if there's anything that needs more work as a tennis player than dinks and drops. If you want to sit and drill stuff, it's middle of the transition zone drops, and it's dinking and dinking. That is a shot that you've never had to hit in pickleball. Not all dinks are created equal. There's topspin, there's slice, there's push, there's dead. There's all kinds of different dinks other than just the one of getting it over the net into the safe space we call the non-volley zone. But that is typically, I always call it the tennis dip, where someone comes in, they're just add water, they're very good, they've got these great shots, they do pretty well immediately, and then they start upping to the level that their base tennis skills were typically great footwork, split steps, things like that. They butt up against a pickleball wall of people that know how to play pickleball and know all the shots and are nuanced. And it's typically that short game of dinks and drops that they struggle the most with.
Yep. And with the dinks, though, what I really don't want people to come out here and try to do at the beginning if you're transitioning is don't worry about the aggressive dinks or really spinny dinks. Like, just dink the ball where you want it to go and make it bounce in the kitchen, because you have to walk before you can run. You want to be able to hit the ball where you want it to go every single time. Dink it into the kitchen, work on that first. Then you will get to the more aggressive roll, push, whatever you want to call them, dinks.
It's almost like stand-up comedy. You'll get the feedback you need very quickly as you go up against better players and you see what they do with the shots that you hit. And you go, oh, that stuff doesn't work. I don't know if you heard the Agassi interview on, I can't remember what they call it now. It used to be called Tennis Sucks podcast. But he talked about that part of the game, the dinks and drops, as something that, of course, you literally never have to do. Maybe a drop shot in tennis. You do an occasional slicey drop, tricky thing as you're playing, but that wasn't a typical part of singles tennis, certainly much more in doubles. But that part is so humbling for somebody that comes as a really good tennis player and then realizes that their skill set doesn't 100% translate. It's quite significantly less than that when you get to the higher level of doubles pickleball.
Absolutely. And the other thing we talked about again is the transition zone. So I would work on dinks, so being up the kitchen, and the transition zone where you're resetting, because a reset is not something you do very often in tennis, I'll tell you that. That's
like basically you could be standing in the middle of the transition zone. You've got a partner that's maybe hitting balls down at your feet, and you've got to get it to drop in the kitchen, or hitting a ball hard at you, maybe down at your knees, and trying to get the ball to drop into the kitchen versus trying to come around and fire on it, which again, we see a lot. You see a lot of balls from tennis players go into the net or into the back fence because they're trying to hit these big full balls from the middle of the transition zone.
Yeah, especially on inappropriate shots when the ball's like at your knees or at your feet. Those are the ones that you have to learn to reset, to drop.
And you mentioned already, Mircea, but it's worth reinforcing. Every ball at the higher level comes back. And if you think you're hitting a winner in pickleball, don't be shocked when it comes back and you have another shot to hit. So really get into the mindset of 2 or 3 shot combos as you set people up, like the grandmaster himself, Mircea Murariu.
Yeah, and even in singles, just think about hitting a combo. That's the key, especially on big points.
Folks, if there's anything we missed here in the transitioning from tennis episode, please write us. Picklehelp.com. We're always happy to answer your questions. Thank you to Yobow, 402p.com/warmup if you need to get your backpack plus. Mircea, I hope you can go enjoy your evening and maybe the courts tomorrow. I'm going to go play a little pickleball right now.
Thank you, Michael. Please go out there and show some tennis players how it's done. Let's go.
I will do that. Folks, you've now just listened to another episode of 4.0 to Pro. You guys keep on rocking. We always enjoy you. Talk to you soon.
Thank you for listening to 4.0 to Pro. For more tips, find us on Instagram at 4.0 to Pro. If you have a pickleball question, submit it at picklehelp.com. Now, get out there and dominate. But don't forget to have fun.